All right, guys. So the biggest news in the CS2 markets today that we need to talk about is China getting aggressive in the markets once again. Obviously, the past couple of weeks have been insanely volatile, both in the East and in the West, but we do know that the market crash hit China a lot harder. They were panic selling off a lot more things. Things were crashing a lot harder. We saw way bigger percentage drops over in China, and then prices kind of stayed lower in China for a while. But now prices, especially on certain items over in China, are bouncing back in a huge way. A lot of graphs are looking exactly like this one, where we're seeing prices stay pretty flat and then things just go absolutely vertical. We need to talk about which items specifically are pumping and why, and what it means for the rest of the market, what it could potentially mean for your investments as well. That's what we're going to be talking about today and plenty more. But of course, first, just want to mention a couple things. First up, my cash trading business. If you guys are looking to sell any of your CS2 items, turn them into cold hard cash, crypto, PayPal, any other payment method, whatever, hit me up over on Twitter. It's going to be linked in the description. We like to buy anything and everything for the right price, but of course, we're always trying to get those big deals done. So if you recently traded up for any gold, you want to sell those off, you have any coverts that have spiked up in price recently that you're looking to move, hit me up. We can get a big deal done today. And of course, my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/I_am_Jerm. We've been streaming pretty much every single day over there. The streams have really been fun. We've been hanging out, having good vibes, doing trade ups, looking up investment ideas, talking about the markets, all that good stuff. So I would definitely appreciate if you guys dropped a follow and came and check out our next stream. That would be absolutely awesome. With that being said, let's get right into this video today. So what we are talking about here is, of course, coverts. This is the M4A1S Hyper Beast field tested. This is a chroma case. And I know we talked a little bit about chroma skins yesterday, but you can see this has gone absolutely vertical. And one of the crazier things here that is happening with coverts over in China right now, I wanted to talk about. So I tweeted out this. I said the cheapest night wishes are pretty much $80 on Buff. And here's a screenshot from when I tweeted this. We can look at that. There is, field tested for 84. There's well worn for 77. There's battle scarred for 77. We're sitting at around $80 for night wishes right now. Field tested, well worn, and battle scarred for a lot of these good collection trade ups end up being pretty much the same price because they all trade up into a lot of the same things. There doesn't end up being a very big difference between field tested, well worn, battle scarred, whatever. So we're in about the $80 price range. But if we went over to CS Float, and again, I took this screenshot at the exact same time, there was a ton of Dreams and Nightmare stuff listed for around $65. Again, there's 3 Night Wishes for $65. There's a Night Wish for $66. There's a Starlight Protector for $68. I think the next one's for like $68 or $69 as well, somewhere in there. Yeah, about $68 there. So again, this is a huge difference. Now, you might not think this is that interesting or that significant at the beginning. Like, hey, we know that Eastern and Western prices are always a little bit different, whatever. But the crazy thing here is just a day or two ago, not only were Chinese prices not higher than the Western prices, Chinese prices were lower, and not just lower, they were significantly lower. And I know this because I have been buying up a ton of coverts from China over the past week or so. A lot of those are still on trade hold right now, and if I don't end up getting trade reversed on those, I'm going to be up a ton of money depending on where the market goes in the next couple of days. But I've been using proxy buying services and stuff like that to actually purchase items through UPIN because they were cheaper than the West. Again, I'm a guy who always has float balance. I'm always buying and selling on float every single day. I always have float balance ready to go. If prices were lower in the West, I would be buying on float, but I was buying through China because some prices were like 10, 15, 20% less, and these trade ups, they were insanely profitable even with Western prices. So once you started to factor these Eastern prices where you can also do the trade ups and then sell on Western markets, these trade ups were insanely profitable. So in just a couple of days, for China to go from not only cheaper than CS Float and cheaper than the major Western markets, but to flip it and go even and then even more expensive and significantly more expensive, we're talking about the difference between $65 and $80. That is a significant percentage. So China started going crazy with these coverts. China started buying up these coverts all over the place. And again, this was not just the Night Wish. I started to look at different ones of these trade ups and stuff like that, and you can see here that these are the buff or the float prices that I started factoring in. I want to put here, we can put float price, and then I started also looking at like a UPIN price, or a Chinese price, and you can see that for a lot of these significant trade ups, these are some of the most important and impactful trade ups in the markets right now. You have Breakout, Chroma, Dreams and Nightmares going for Butterfly Gamma. You have the Fever Case trade ups. You have Gamma trade ups, Prisma trade ups, Spectrum trade ups. These are some very popular ones. And you can see here the price for the lowest stuff that I was able to find on float, about $150, and in China it was about $160. Chroma, cheapest is about $110, and again in China it's looking about $115. Dreams and Nightmares and Operation Riptide stuff was about $75 at the cheapest at the time that I was recording this. $80 in China. Fever Case about 50 bucks, 47 in China, so actually pretty similar there. But you can see here, this was one of the lower ROI trade ups that I could find as well. Again, this was the ROI that I found of these trade ups, at the CS float prices, or at the current Western prices. In Gamma stuff was about 100 bucks, 110 over in China. Prisma stuff about the same in the West and in the East. Spectrum stuff was about 86 bucks and a little bit higher in China. So again, across the board, this was not just one collection or anything like that. This was across the board. Chinese coverts pumped. They flipped the Western markets entirely, and that is insane. But then, interestingly enough, again, we did see the Western market start to catch up. Again, when I looked at that stuff just a couple of hours ago, these night wishes were 65 bucks and $80 over in China. And for a while, Western prices were higher in China, Chinese prices were lower, and all the people who were talking about the dead cat bounce, and people who were talking about another leg down in the market, people were talking about how we had another crash ready to go, people were saying, oh, how long is it going to be before the Western prices come down to the Chinese prices? Because a lot of people say, China sets the market. A lot of people act like China is these market overlords in the CS2 world, when they're really not. Prices are oftentimes different in the East and West. Before any of this market crash, or before any of these updates or anything like that, prices were already different. Eastern and Western prices, over the past couple of years, have almost never been exactly the same. And oftentimes China has been cheaper, but people are like, oh, the West is overpriced right now. The West is going to come down, blah blah blah. But then out of nowhere, the West didn't come down. The East came up. China came up huge, and now we are seeing almost the exact same prices. Again, even a little bit higher in China, but across the board, a lot of very very similar prices right now. If we look at like the Night Wish, this is the Night Wish for 80 bucks on float, and we're looking at about I don't know. This hasn't exactly updated, I don't think, but we're looking at, this says $75 in China for the Night Wish, but actually prices are dropping now, so this is insane. Chinese prices popped up, and then literally as I'm recording this video, Chinese prices are popping back down. So they passed up float for a little bit, and maybe now they're coming back down, but no matter what, this graph does look crazy. And what's interesting here is one reason why I think maybe the Night Wish specifically is coming back down a little bit, because if we go to the actual trade up, again, this is CS2 Locker, where I have this Night Wish trade up. Again, I'm just using field tested Night Wishes because it doesn't really matter when you're going for gamma Dopplers. Are always going to be in factory new, so you can use any float of stuff. What is interesting here is if we put in these Night Wishes, and again, we can put the input cost at $400, meaning we paid about 80 bucks for each of these. Again, we see $80 as the price on CS Float right now, and we saw $80 or even a little bit higher than $80 as the peak price over on Buff 163. Again, here's that graph on Buff 163. Some of them were selling as high as 83 bucks. But when we go here and look at this, the ROI of this trade up actually starts to become not profitable. So, $80 and higher actually ends up being maybe not the best price for these, because again, one reason we've seen the coverts pumping so much over the past couple of weeks is because a lot of these trade ups are still, insanely profitable and stuff like that. And again, when I look at this chart that I was looking, some of these, even at these prices, were still really profitable. Dreams, the Chroma trade up still being 22% ROI, the Breakout being plus 10% ROI, Prisma, Gamma being 14, 17%. A lot of these low float glove trade ups still looking really good, even at crazy prices. But again, the Dreams and Nightmare stuff started to go negative. Some of these started to get into single digit ROIs. But if we go back down to like $65, what we saw in float previously, we have an input cost of $325. You see this gets back in the positive. So, I think these eventually, all these trade ups are going to go into the negative ROI. Obviously, that's usually what we see for case unboxings and trade ups and all that stuff. But I think maybe the market started pumping a little bit too fast, a little bit too crazy, and that's why we've seen such a steep drop off in the Chinese prices already. Again, we saw these selling for $83 just a couple of hours ago. Now they're already down to $72. We saw China go above, the West, and now come back down. But still, even if China is just close to the West, that is still a very, very new revelation in the markets, because like I said, China had really been below it before. So we can run through a lot of these top trade up items and just kind of see they all kind of follow the same path. This is the Hyper Beast, part of the Chroma trade ups. Again, just absolutely insane run up over the last couple of days, going from 85 bucks to 113 bucks. Very, very crazy there. We have the Cyrex, which I believe is part of the Breakout. Again, here you can see the same type of stuff. It was sitting around 140 bucks for a couple of days, then it explodes up to 175. We have the Bad Trip, which has gone very, very, very crazy. I know I tweeted this out as well, but the Bad Trips on some sites right now are actually more expensive than the op print streams, which one doesn't really make sense. I mean, maybe it makes sense because people don't want to. I don't know. It doesn't really make sense. But right now, on a lot of places, the op print stream is the cheaper of the Fever Case coverts, meaning that you should be trading up up your print streams for golds if you want to like be the most efficient and have the highest ROI and stuff. But yeah, bad trips have pumped up so crazy that they started passing up the print stream in terms of price. But again, these bad trips were sitting at about $40 for a couple days. Then they had another leg up to $54. Here's the roll cage. I can't remember what this one is part of. The roll cage is part of the Gamma collection. Again, same thing here. We're sitting around $80. Then it spikes up to 114, maybe coming back down a little bit, but still a huge gap. And again, these prices that we saw over these past couple of days, this is the Player 2, which I believe is Prisma. Player 2, was sitting around $40, and hey, that's probably significantly lower than what we're seeing on, in terms of float prices. But then it sees this explosion up to like $50 to close that gap with the CS float prices. And then here's that USP Neo Noir as well, part of that spectrum. Again, same thing here, seeing about $60, and then exploding all the way up to 90, which is absolutely insane. That's like a 50% gain over the course of one day. China is going crazy with coverage right now, and I know people were replying to my tweet and saying, of course, well, how the turntables, which is pretty funny, but then trade ups are profitable. China wants to take advantage of this stuff. Start telling China we're doing the arbitrage for them is super funny. China flipped the West. I mean, they really have in a big way, but I think it does make sense because obviously, like I said, China has a ton of money in the markets. They love doing big plays and doing crazy stuff, and these ROIs on these trade-ups were so profitable that it didn't make sense. And it didn't make sense that Chinese prices were so low. Maybe China was still thinking that golds were going to go lower, or maybe they were still, worried about a market crash or whatever. Maybe they still had funds tied up from like trade reversing and all this other stuff. Like, I have no idea. But all I know is that coverts went from a steal of a deal over in China, like too good of a deal to pass up. That's why I put thousands of dollars into these, proxy buying services to get my hands on some coverts at Chinese prices. And now that seems to have dried up a little bit. Now, again, what's going to happen in the next couple of days? I don't know. Is the Chinese market going to come back down? Is the West going to keep up with China and explode even higher? I don't know. But like I said, as some of these trade-ups start to become unprofitable and start to go into the negative a little bit, the price increases on these coverts and all the other skins are definitely going to start to slow down. So you definitely want to take advantage of finding those skins where you can get them for a good price and at a profitable price while you still can. Now, again, I would not be buying these Night Wishes at $80 because I really don't want to buy into these ROIs once they go negative. But if you can get your hands on these Night Wishes or, these Dreams and Nightmares coverts or these Operation Riptide coverts or whatever for $65, I still think there's enough meat on the bone for you to still get some nice gains. But again, once you get up into that $80 plus territory, it doesn't seem like there's as much room for them to continue to grow into the future. Now, again, I'm sure coverts will still be a nice investment into the future, but I want to take that surefire gains of, hey, this trade up that shouldn't be profitable is profitable, so I'm buying those items. That's why I've been constantly searching up what trade ups are profitable at what prices and making sure I'm buying the coverts below those thresholds. So where, I have a lot of room for this thing to go right. So again, if I could buy some of these Night Wishes up for $65, I would be doing that. But at the $80 price point, I'm probably passing that up for right now. But again, like I said, we are starting to see these Chinese prices drop back down even in real time. Again, as we refresh, it just went from $72 to $71. So if these continue to fall, these get back into that $60 to $65 range over on China, then buying, through some of these Chinese proxy buying services starts to make sense again, as long as we don't see the golds continue to drop down. But I don't know. For whatever reason, China found out about these coverts and they started going absolutely insane. And we're gonna have to see, where the market goes from here, because that was a very, very crazy thing. Again, these things went up insane. They've been going up insane in the East and the West, but they went absolutely insane the past couple of days over in China. And I was not ready for that. I was ready to keep buying these up at a huge discount over in China, and then it just kind of disappeared all at once. But I am hoping that comes back, and hopefully this won't be the last of, some very, very good deals we can get through some of these Chinese proxy buying services. But that is pretty much it for this video today, guys. Hopefully I catch you in the next one. Until then, peace.